We're now all set to bring to you our Chief Guest address on diversity and inclusion through the government lens. Let me extend a very warm welcome to Srimati Meenakshi Lekhi, Honorable Minister of State for External Affairs and Culture, Government of India. After graduating in BSc Honours from a Hindu college and doing her LLB from Campus Law Centre, Delhi University, she practiced in various courts with particular focus on indirect taxes, criminal law. She also practiced in focus on India's various issues when it came to pertaining women in various courts, such as domestic violence, family law disputes, and more importantly, the issues of permanent commission of lady officers in the armed forces. Srimati Lekhi has been a social activist and also actively associated with institutions and organizations working towards protection of the right of women and children in the country. She has held the post of National Vice President of the BJP Mahila Morcha in 2010, has also been a very active part of drafting the committees for Women's Reservation Bill and Sexual Harassment of Women at Workforce Bill, among many others. So who better than her to truly take this away? I'd like to extend a very, very warm welcome to you, ma'am.
Thank you very much, Isha. Thanks a lot for a beautiful introduction. But I just feel that today, when we are talking of diversity and inclusion, uh, so I think one word is complementary to the other, because when you think of inclusion, include what? Include obviously not the similar thinking, similar looking, similar sounding people, but inclusion would mean diversity. So the necessary aspect of inclusion is diversity. And when we talk of diversity, then obviously we are talking of differences, but we are looking at things in a unified way. So it's all about inclusion. Diversity itself means inclusion. So two words, the diversity and inclusion, to my mind, are complementary, supplementary words. And when we look around and we see workspaces, workplaces, and look at the scientific data management on all these aspects, one gets to know that somehow, whenever the word through the history is marginalized communities, marginalized people, marginalized extinctions of marginalized people, is due to a non inclusive manner of functioning and a decrying need to include people, include things with diversity. And today, obviously, when we are talking about workspaces, we are talking about human habitation of workspaces. But in the general understanding, at least as far as Indian ethos are concerned, we link animate, inanimate. We link and we see the whole world as one family. We see diversity as part of existence. We look at animals with the same compassion. We look at humans, and we always say that everybody is part of the other, and thus inclusion of everything around you. And life in harmony means inclusion of everyone around you is important for our existence. So that's the basic principle on which Indian mindset and ethos operate on, or should operate on. But somehow we've been too influenced by different thought processes across the time span, and obviously not always positively influenced. Many a times we are negatively influenced. We try to incorporate things which were not socially, ethically, morally, or thoughtfully part of our thinking process, because uh, in the ancient times to the medieval times, the history reflected differently. From medieval times to modern India, history reflected differently. The colonial period reflected it differently, and post-colonial, of course, we inherited the colonial biases and incorporated all of them as part of our system, which they definitely are not. And today, when we are here to discuss diversity, I'm very, very pleased that people have started discussing diversity and inclusion at workplaces, because this is not so. This was not so. At least the world across the globe is trying to look at the world and workplaces, especially the corporate workplaces, differently. And the especially the people who are handling the HR departments have started to identify those gaps, that there are people who are otherwise marginalized because they don't have adequate space in the workplace. and that vision is getting lost. So people have started incorporating this as part of the very existence which has been ethically, morally been our forte, and the world is started to look at it in that format. So I think if we go by the researches, if we go by the kind of papers which have been drawn by some scholastic people, it shows that more diverse a place is, better output they will have in whatever goals they wish to achieve. So a workplace would mean that while you look at diversity, it also means that you're getting diverse talent on the same table. And when diverse thought processes augment each other, and it's easier to achieve those goals. So whether in terms of the sheer value of a company, or in terms of output achievement, or because inputs are coming from various people and who have varied ability, that varied ability when put together will always produce a better result, and thus achieving goals becomes easier. Now that's the basic principle on which diversity and inclusion is working in tandem with each other, and people are trying to think and work along those lines. So when a person like me would look at it, I always feel that let's move beyond discussion. Let's sort of act out and work out. So as an elected MP, I would say that when you move in the area and you represent a certain constituency, and you know that each of these people have voted for you and you represent all of them together, so protecting their interests becomes very, very relevant part of the exercise. And in that relevant part of the exercise, say I need some people to man traffic lights, or I need some people to man the streets when there is some work, or I need someone to man household to do the cooking job, to manage the gates, and to manage my work in terms of typing skills and others. So what is relevant? I mean, the whether the person ability to execute that work is what the focus has to be. The focus is not whether the person's typing through speaking, or person is correcting it with a thumb or a finger, or person's typing with feet. It is irrelevant as long as the skill set is such that the person's able to deliver what you wish that person to deliver. So I feel there has to be a focus on the ability. And when we say diversity and inclusion, inclusion would mean people with diverse skill set need to be amalgamated at workplaces, and the biases which one may carry have to be cast aside. And bias could be that only five fingers is what you need to type, or only a person who can speak needs to do the household chores, or a person who looks physically different cannot man the gates. I think these biases need to be cast out. What you need to focus is the ability for a particular job. And the moment you start focusing on the ability, diversity becomes the key word. That diversity would also mean different abilities of different people. And then when I say move beyond conversations, then I also mean that diversity and inclusion should not just become uh, a topic of discussion on certain days and times, but there has to be a visible commitment. And visible commitment would mean that we need to articulate and sound authentic in our commitment to diversify our workplaces and meet the challenges, and challenge the status quo. And sometimes that risk taking, giving, when you give opportunity to different people, then there's maybe some amount of risk taking, that when you are employing different kind of people, whether the output is going to be the same or not. But that can happen even with people who who are not diverse, who may be similar looking, similar sounding people. So that challenge needs to be taken to make your workplace look more compassionate, and not just look, but be more compassionate, be more understanding, and learn to deal with differences and learn to handle the same question differently. And there is some amount of humility which needs to be part of our existence. And that humility comes when you deal with people, and maybe at times modest capabilities need to be skilled up, and some amount of admission to mistakes must happen, and thus only we can create spaces for everyone else and contribute to the well-being of the workplace and well-being of the society at large. Then awareness of bias, I would say that uh, when we talk of diversity and inclusion, that means we have started to understand that there is a bias. And the moment we start admitting and create awareness around bias, then our policy decisions will be such that the blind spots will be discussed, and flaws in the system will be understood. And thus, we can ensure meritocracy. And meritocracy can have different disciplines. So I remember there was uh, a coffee place which I used to frequent quite a lot, and they only employed some deaf and dumb people. And I became friends with some of them because every alternate day or once or twice a week I was there, and and the exchange of uh, gratitude towards them made me friends with some of them, and thus I feel the meritocracy laid in the fact that they serve very good coffee. The meritocracy was that they didn't interfere too much, and they were polite, and I was polite to them, and all one wanted was some space and a good cup of coffee. And we ended up developing a very, very good friendship with all of them, and then learned that two, three of those employees lived in my area, um, and we continue to interact with each other. So at times, this open-mindedness also removes the bias that you could do certain jobs of certain nature and emphasize on the skill set of those people who may be differently abled and who may have a different skill set than you one can ever imagine. Then there's some amount of curiosity also, and that curiosity is an ability to learn constantly, to have an open mindset, and deep curiosity about others can also sort of um, take away the bias at times, and a capacity to listen, and without being judgmental about people and their thought processes. Thus, I think in all this process, empathy is a core capacity which a person can showcase. Um, Intelligence can, I mean, at my stage of life, one has learned that intelligence can have different quotients, and that intelligence quotient will also have emotional quotient, it will have creative quotient, it will, of course, have the IQ, which we usually deal with. But the sheer value system need not revolve around the mathematical intelligence, but special intelligence is equally important. And thus, to have an effective methodology at workplace would include cultural intelligence as very, very important aspect. And thus, all these places would lead to effective collaboration. I would like to know how much more time do I have, and I'll proceed accordingly. I do have time. Okay. Thank you very much. So I was saying, you know, uh, this, whatever I've said so far, sounds like a laundry list. And this laundry list needs to be taken care of. if we really want to diversify our places, we really wish to work on the side of inclusion, then we must regularly ask ourselves these questions. And there should be more conversation on the, if you can call it a corporate table, about this. And there should be some methodology evolved uh, uh, in the boardrooms, that there should be certain ticks, like you have performance ticks on so many aspects when you start judging the people you work with. A similar kind of ticking process should happen on the inclusion and diversification of workspace. And once we show our commitment to this particular aspect, we'll also show our sensitivity to the subject. And that sensitivity becomes part of our day to day existence. The moment this commitment is there and that sensitivity is our work of day to day existence, it will change the way we work. And I oft give a personal example. And the personal example is at an early age in life, when I was in college, and I'm talking of the times when we didn't have computers, and I come from that era. So typewriters and tape recorders were the best available technology. And there was this guy called Kamalbir Singh who studied with us, was doing honors in English subject, and was a visually impaired person. And we, as young kids, used to read aloud to him. The books we would read aloud to him whenever we got spare time, and record that lesson for him. So, with the result, he would just listen to whatever has been spoken of, and he would need a writer to write and dictate his answer sheet. And this person used to top Delhi University in English honors. So, which is a feat which kind of sends a message to all of us, and which was a early sensitization program. I must say, at the age of 17, 18, if you get sensitized to somebody who's so bright, who's brilliant, and is visually impaired, and you are able to assist that person in some little ways, it formulates a lifelong friendship. It formulates a lifelong learning, and makes you more sensitive and appreciative of the qualities the other people possess. And the result was that once having been exposed to the bright side of a visually impaired person at an early age, you learn to respect, you learn to deal with people as equals and not like handing down kind of attitude, or they are your equals, and maybe at times much smarter, much better. So that was first lesson in my life. And subsequently, of course, many years later, I don't recall how many years later, but at least 15, 20 years post my college days, I became part of the blind school in Delhi, JPM Blind School. And I chaired a couple of positions in that school and continued to be their patron and work with them, and several other schools which are for physically challenged people. Uh, and I know the first software engineer was produced from my from blind school, which I work with in Delhi. So what I want to say that once you have that early life sensitivity lesson, a practical side of it, you will learn many lessons through your life, and which one continues to learn every day. I may have worked later with some of the artists who are such beautiful performers of Kathak and many dance genre, which is based, who basically do performance on the wheelchairs. So you know the ability. They're far stronger than many people who we call normal. So I would say there is nothing called normal. We all are abnormal in our respective ways. So learn to deal with bias more than anything else. It's the same thing as when women were not shown and seen on several places of position of power and position of strength, whether on corporate boards or politics or military or wherever. One would say, oh, women are not capable, or they are less capable, and thus they remain out of the workspace. I would say the same bias exists towards other people. The newer and the better way of living is to not focus on inabilities, but to focus on the abilities which each one possesses. With these words, I would like to thank you all for having me over for such a wonderful discussion. And my request to all those who are online with all of us to go beyond discussion. Discussion is a very, very good start. At least we've started talking. At least we've started admitting to the fault lines. But let's go beyond and put all this in action, starting with maybe look into the blind spots and build the infrastructure, because abilities also need uh, some support in execution. So in that execution plan, like some may be really, really bright person, and there are many examples. We know of many scientists who were great scientists, but they had some amount of inability in them. So they needed certain equipments to handle that inability. Similarly, a person may have some inability to express the capability. Let's give them the tools. And those tools could be wheelchairs, speaking machines, listening machines, spaces, special toilets, uh, easy ramps, whatever infrastructural support we need to use a person's ability, we should start working on that and let us make that part of our existence. And I feel design is one part where we, as a country, need to emphasize on. I feel in the design aspect, when we are so creative, we are so able, we are missing the game by not focusing on design, making it easy. Ease of living needs to be provided for all the special people who will contribute further to our not just GDP or the share value, but we as a society as well. Thank you very much. Jai Hind.